Hello, welcome back to the FE8 Auto Chess Run. Following a suggestion from a friend who came along to the premiere of the video covering the main game, this is a summary of an attempt at the postgame of Sacred Stones on Autobattle. While I recommend watching the main campaign video first, for the uninitiated or as a reminder of how this works, this is a mod made by Vesly, link in the description, which makes it so that if you end your turn with blue units still able to move, they are controlled by the AI. Due to the practicalities of the AI potentially running out of weapon and item usages, both also have infinite uses. This is actually my first time quote-unquote attempting Sacred Stones postgame at all, besides recording footage of General Gilliam auto chess clearing the tower for the Armonite move video. So for the true attempt flavour, while I let myself control the lords during the main campaign, I will be letting the AI have full control outside of when I absolutely have to move people. While we finish the main campaign with just 5 units alive in Erica, Ephraim, Gilliam, Garrick and Mur, each campaign offers us the opportunity to recruit a bunch of new units that appeared during the main game. This will hopefully offer us more wacky AI variety rather than these 5 running around with their monster effective weaponry. As such, as part of my preparation to go through first the tower and then the ruins, I stock up on elixirs for the each campaign units. I also give Mur the Philly shield for any archers. Floors 1 and 2 go by very quickly, with only some small AI movement moments. For some reason, these intensify during floor 3, which initially sees Gilliam run ahead of everyone on his own, with his 5 move compared to their 6 and 7 move stats, before they decide to stop being cowards against enemies who are largely incapable of dealing any damage to them. This is in stark contrast to me saying in the original video upon promoting him to General, that since the low move means that he won't end up dramatically ahead of Erica, which is pretty funny. After the completion of Valni 3, Caleb joined the party. He does so as a level 12 hero with his standard inventory as a boss of a Silver Axe, Tomahawk and a Hop-on Guard. Funnily enough, he doesn't really need this with his base 14 luck, given the setting involving basically no killer weapons. Unfortunately, his speed of 13 is noticeably worse than Garrick's, so my hopes for his survival once fast, hard-hitting enemies start to appear are low. Floors 4 and 5 are similarly uneventful to floors 1 and 2, with no one dying like Dosler pathetically did in the main campaign. Things pick up back again slightly on floor 6, mostly because they slow down very dramatically due to the abundance of walls and the AI's refusal to break them down if out of my control. Fortunately, there are some bone walkers on this map with the AI setting to break down a few of them for me. Unfortunately, they only care about their one designated wall, and the one who tries to break down the wall immediately to the west of spawn is killed by the Autobots. This means that despite my hopes not to, I still have to break down an absolute ton of them, slowly by myself. After clearing floor 6, Orson joins as a level 13 paladin with a rune sword and silver lance in his inventory. This iconic weapon of Hector's is immediately given to Erica so that she has a 1-2 range attacking option, which does also handily have the Nosferatu effect, which is nice as she is still not allowed to die. Having basically a slightly worse Seth is never a bad thing, but Seth did die, so we will find out what happens to Orson as well. Floor 7 immediately puts Orson to the grindstone, as it sees a bunch of weird AI unit movements, meaning only the 8 move unit does all the work. I like to think this is in penance for his crimes against both the land of Renee and also Monica's corpse. Somewhat handily, having units lagging behind slightly means that when the reinforcements appear on this route map, they are able to quickly mop them up. In the process of completing floor 7, we apparently have hit the 200 enemy kill requirement for Reeve to join us. This brings us our first bishop of the run, as all the potential bishops of Artur, Mulder and Natasha died long ago. With him, he brings a Purge Tome, which promises to bring hilarity. As our first unit to join with S Light Magic, I also give him a Voldy for the lowered weight and defense bonus compared to the Aura Tome in his starting inventory, despite it actually doing less damage than Aura due to Sacred Twin double monster effectiveness overriding Slayer's triple. Speaking of Slayer, yup, that means Slayer Purge, baby! Reeve kills several enemies this way, including this here Gorgon, albeit notably after it has already killed Orson. Now he matches Monica again, so I'm sure he's happier this way. It turns out that none of the creature campaign units have death quotes, which is a bit sad because I do enjoy that additional aspect of it to a unit's death, should it come to pass. It does make sense though. After Orson's death and the eventual reign of Slayer ends, nothing else eventful happens on floor 8, meaning that we come to our second clear of the tower, the first having been during the main campaign. Just like that clear where we lost Dozler, he'd lost one unit in the form of Orson. He won't be missed, I'll be real. I'm appreciative of the rune sword though. After this run of the tower, I am very confused, because the good wiki tells me that Ismare joined after one clear of the tower. She is clearly not in my unit screen, so I'm concerned that due to the pre-post-game tower clear, she'll simply never appear. Honestly, with what I did to her son, I get it. In seriousness though, given this uncertainty, I decided against doing the tower again to unlock Selena, and so head straight into an attempt of the Lagdou Ruins. This quickly allays my fears of where Ismare is, as she joins right when I enter the ruins. So, oops. Things that happen when you have zero experience with this game mode. She joins the level 9 Swordmaster and, frankly, she is astonishingly similar to what I would expect of a 29 Swordmaster Joshua, his massive HP lead aside. With her, she brings the weapon wielded by Incel King Carlisle in Erica Root Chapter 14. Erica's infamous windsword from the hit game Fire Emblem Engage. Naturally, this weapon has to go on her immediately, along with the Rapier and Siglind, completing Erica's set of iconic weapons. Ismare gets given the rune sword as recompense. Nothing overly exciting happens on Lagdou 1, other than Reeve continuing to slay or purge down some enemies. It's a monster route map where none of my units die or nearly die, so what is there to say really? Thankfully, and not thankfully, this trend does not continue for long. On the very next map, both Ismare and Reeve bring some excitement to the quote-unquote playthrough. Ismare does so by nearly dying due to overextending against an enemy with a 1-2 range weapon of their own, which she avoids due to a lucky dodge. Less lucky is Reeve, who gets killed by a Gwilgi. Actually no, that's giving the AI too much credit, because it happened over 2 turns at a terrain choke point. Correction. Reeve loses while doing absolutely nothing, instead of even try to move and attack with Slayer Purge. The loss of Slayer Purge saddens me, but the AI certainly did AI. The trend of Lagdou bringing death continues in Lagdou Ruins 3. Ismare gets hit by a Gorgon Stone and dies very shortly thereafter. The moral of this story is that there is a limit to how green you can be to survive in a Fire Emblem game. Unfortunately, this does mean the loss of the rune sword, which is very tragic, as I suspect that it would probably be more useful than the wind sword, at least for sustained purposes. Shortly thereafter, still on the same map, Kaluk also dies to an enemy that doubles him, like I predicted he would. Funnily enough, this means we're now back to the OG 5 survivors of the War of the Stones. These 5 heroes are all very scared of the last enemy on this map, the Poison Sword. Clearly, they all still fear they will meet the same end as Inez. Similarly to the 6th floor of the Tower of Valni, we end up on yet another map where due to an abundance of walls, I have to actually control the units for a very significant portion of the map. This is probably my least favourite Fire Emblem map that I played in a good while, because imagine loading up a Fire Emblem game to play Fire Emblem. For real though, it's an awful map, and whoever made it is my mortal enemy. Lagdou 5 has poison walls as its gimmick. Frankly, it is very uninteresting because of all the time spent watching poison damage animations, though the poison jet damage does claim an enemy, which is funny. At the end of Lagdou 5, both Hayden, Inez and Tana's dad, and Glenn, Cormac's brother, join. Hayden joins due to the Autobots having apparently killed over 200 enemies in this Ruins run thus far. He is a ranger, which makes sense given that Inez is a bow user as a sniper, and Nidhogg is one of Frelia's sacred twin weapons. More exciting is the join of Glenn, who joins after the completion of Lagdou Ruins 5 as a Wyvern Lord. Sadly for him, the Philly Shield is Mer's property, so he'll have to brave the Archers on his own. He does so immediately during Lagdou Ruins 6, which features split army deployment that I do not alter in order to respect the AI's wishes. This means that he meets his end within his very first turn of deployment, which is a new record, excepting Ross, who died before I recruited him. At the very least, this record is shared by Hayden, who also dies on that same enemy phase. It's a shame to lose them both, especially Glenn, because a flyer had the opportunity to do some silly AI things. Alas.
He died like a true knight.
Also during this map, Lone Gilliam gets stoned by a Gorgon. I really do think that he's going to die, but then the next turn, the Gorgon tries to stone him again. Well, it turns out that the Gorgons he has to contend with only have stone. and the enemies here are entirely physical and can't damage his nearly capped general defense. Unfortunately, this does mean that I have to wait out 2 full doses of stone before he can continue killing things. This is because according to the rules I set, he will technically be able to unstone and then kill everything else in his section. Eventually, it does come to pass though. In Lagdou 7, Gillian once again gets stoned by a Gorgon. He is not so lucky this time. These Gorgons actually have Demon Surge. Mind, he doesn't actually die to one of the Gorgons, instead dying to a Mogul crit. Luckily for me, I don't have to continue on without him. Ephraim also gets stoned and then crit, resulting in a game over and thus ending the attempt. Well, that was something. In the first attempt to the ruins, all of the Creature campaign units either died on their join map or by Lagdou 3, but we did get to Lagdou 7. This makes me think that probably we could do this, with better RNG and stats. As a result, it's time for the Salty Runback, featuring capped stats and bringing back copies of the Sacred Twin weapons that I lost in some form. Since it would be technically possible to bring along a ton of stat boosters from the Grado Keep and Johanna Hall secret shops for the Creature campaign units, any joining Creature campaign units will also immediately have their stats capped out. I do so by adding all the stat boosters and non-PRF Sacred Twin weapons to the prep shop. This includes the boots, which I allow myself to dispense a single pair of to each individual unit, so that they can be the best they can theoretically be, and also to save time and avoid the strange distancing phenomenon. The result is this army of extremely green flashing units, including, of course, the units who died during the first Lagdou Ruins attempt. I also max out everyone's con stat for maximum green funnies, including those of the mounted units, meaning that they all have 0 aid, or rather, 0 capacity to rescue. Erica doesn't have an aid number displayed at all, I believe because of the sexist con formula, meaning that she would theoretically have -5 aid. Regardless, the lack of ability for mounts to rescue is acceptable, as due to the auto-test tendencies, none of them are going to be rescuing each other anyway. Unfortunately, in order to be as prepared as possible for the second go of Lagdou Ruins, we should have Selena, whose unlock condition is completing the Tower of Valni 3 times in total. This means that I go through it twice more at extreme speed up, which I will spare you from as nothing of note happens. At any rate, the result is a capped Mage Knight with infinite use bolting, which is less exciting than infinite use Slayer Purge, but it is still funny. Just like the first attempt, Lagdou Ruins maps 1 and 2 are very straightforward and uninteresting. If anything, they're more so, because this time Ismare and Reeve don't come anywhere near close to dying. I quickly realised though, that these cap stats don't make my green army invulnerable though, as Lagdou 3 brings with it an abundance of Gorgons, and therefore stone. Both Erica and Garrick get stoned at low hit rates, and as a result of the stone status, come very close to getting 30% crit that would kill them if they happened. Thankfully, neither of them die. While Erica's death would obviously just be a reset, Garrick's death would be sad as one of the original 5, but I would be obliged to continue regardless. Towards the end of the map, we get a repeat of Lute and Natasha's romance from the mainline video, but in a more sinister fashion. We decide to start physicking Selena while she is full HP. This isn't even helpful for building staff rank, as he already has S light rank, preventing him from reaching S staff rank, which he already has A rank in. At the very least, this means that she is able to build up some more anima rank, so that she can hopefully at least potentially use Excalibur soon, even if the AI would rather she use bolting. Once again, like in the first run, Lagdou 4 and 5 also pass without much happening. Other than how in the case of Lagdou 4 I have to control the units a fair bit to break down walls. The completion of Lagdou 5 once again brings Glenn and Hayden, whom I roid up with stat boosters. I also add a Philly shield into the prep shop for Glenn to use. All of this means that unlike the first run, Hayden and Glenn both survive past the very first turn of their deployment. In fact, both of them, and everyone else, survive Lagdou 6 with little fanfare. In the 7th map of Lagdou Ruins, where the first attempt died due to Ephraim getting stoned and getting crit, there are strangely no instances of people even getting stone attempted on them. I'm not sure why, I suspect that the higher move played a big role in this, meaning that if the green units were in range of the Gorgon's attack ranges, it was in such a range where they could be attacked with Demon Surge instead. Occasionally I do get worried about the HP values of the units, but everyone is fine. I just wish that these darn route maps would stop spawning in so many reinforcements. After completing Lagdou 7, we get Volta, who is statused up accordingly. Due to joining with S Lances, I also buy him a Vidofnir from the prep shop for 1 gold, the original having been lost when Seth died in the first part of the finale of the base game. He gets fielded immediately during Lagdou 8, which prior to starting, I'm not sure whether any ground unit traversable tiles will appear on, and thus bring all my flyers. It does, but still the flyers end up being very important combat units regardless. Lagdou 8 doesn't have any Gorgons, which is a relief. However, what it does have is an abundance of Archmoguls with good magical damage and not completely unrealistic hit rates. And also some Dragon Axes to threaten mostly Volta and Glenn, since Mur is flying around with more defense than Gilliam. Once again though, all's well that ends well. What does not end up being fine is my very first attempt at Lagdou 9, which has a large number of Shadow Shot Archmoguls in addition to fire tiles that deal 10 damage that can be lethal at the end of each turn. This means that eventually, after getting hit by multiple attacks and not healing due to being above 50% HP at the start of the turn where he falls below it, Ephraim gets unlucky enough where he dies to the fire tiles. Truly an unfortunate fate. Since he's still a game over condition, this means that I load up a save state and continue from preps of this map. Attempt 2 goes far smoother, albeit not completely smoothly, as Reeve decides to eventually do nothing while standing on a fire tile. This would not be an issue if I had given him an elixir, but I did not. On voice call, I ask if I'm allowed to move him, because this isn't actually the fault of the AI entirely, but partly of myself. I decide that Slayer Purge is too funny to lose at this stage, and so move him. Besides this, the map plays out fine. Now we're here. The final map of the Ruins. This features 10 Necro Dragons, all of whom have 140-ish hit, and thus meaning that even on my dodgiest units, they have around 50 displayed hit. They also all deal over 30 penetrating damage to a capped 60 HP on playable units, meaning that everyone gets 2 shot if hit. In my first attempt, spoiler alert I guess, I fail it, I bring all of the OG 5 survivors, and I discover that the party splits itself north and south, instead of focusing down on one direction at a time. While I am expecting this from the AI, I'm still very disappointed in it. It is a hilariously short attempt, comprising only 87 seconds of footage. The reason for this, despite the fact that Erica does kill the North Center Necro Dragon holding onto the gold gem, she gets hit by it, and both Reeve and Selena choose to heal up other units who also get hit in their valiant attempts against the various Necro Dragons. This means that she is quickly targeted and killed by the Necro Dragons on enemy phase. As a result, for attempt 2, I decide that I will simply not bring along either of the twins, meaning that my final army comprises all of my units who aren't a game mode condition, other than Ismare and Hayden. This will be a rather detailed play-by-play of the important parts, which I think does tip you off to the final outcome. On turn 1, the Autobots kill 4 of the 10 Necro Dragons. Of these 4, 2 of them are cleanly killed by Mur and Garrick as individuals, with Garrick getting an especially convenient dodge. This means that Selena and Reeve are able to heal up Mur, who is our most potent monster killer. The other 2 Necro Dragons killed are done so less cleanly, involving the injuries of both Glenn and Volta, with Glenn's definitely being my fault, because I forget to buy him a Vidofnir before the start of the map, despite him having the required lance rank for it. Volta was probably always going to die, but the fault for the death of this
true knight
lies with me. But at least Gilliam gets a nice dodge as the initiator on the one that Glenn finished off, which is echoed in turn 2, where he also dodges another Necro Dragon attack. Gilliam continues to get lucky, as on the enemy phase, he is saved from death by a Great Shield prog. By the end of turn 2, 6 Necro Dragons are felled, and only 4 remain. The last 2 Necro Dragons in the north are finished off on turn 3, leaving only the 2 to the south. Kalek injures one of these valiantly in a suicide attack, leading to his death on the enemy phase. On turn 5, only healing really happened on turn 4, the final offensive begins, with Myr killing the penultimate Necro Dragon from full, leaving only the Necro Dragon that Kalek chunked before his demise. This last remaining enemy is chipped down slightly by Garrick with the Tomahawk, before the GOAT himself, Gilliam, swoops in to finish the job. He does so not with Garm, which would be the easy answer, but rather with a Brave Axe quad for the flex. Gilliam even procs Great Shield on the counter to flex even harder, so especially after Garrick took the Formorti's kill in the main game, Gilliam Gaming has returned to the channel. At this point, I start laughing quite a lot, which is something that anyone on call at the time, or who I live with, can attest to. This means that all of the original 5 survivors also lived to see the end of the Ruins, which I am quite happy with the results of. They are joined by Ismare and Hayden, who didn't get fielded in the final map, and Reeve and Selena, who provided invaluable offensive and supportive capacities both. So, can the AI beat the creature campaign by itself? The tower? Definitely yes. The Ruins? Yes, but with an asterisk. Said asterisk being with capped stats, and infinite use monster effective and siege weaponry, and maybe also some movement help, and still then, it has to be lucky. So, creature campaign may not be a total joke, it turns out. Still, that is FE8 auto chess fully complete, because I am most definitely not doing this process 2 more times to unlock Leon for literally no gain. This was quite the way to experience the creature campaign for the first time. I found it very funny, and I'm glad that after the first attempt of Lagdou Ruins, I decided to have the Autobots return with a vengeance. After all, it meant more glorious Gilliam gaming, for probably a sizable break for the channel from FE8 runs where he could play a prominent role, if not FE8 in its entirety for a while. Thank you to Vesly once again for creating this mod, it was a lot of fun. If you're interested, you can find a link to the FE Universe thread in the description. And naturally, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, please do consider letting me know in some form, whether that be liking the video, commenting, or subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. Of course, I very much appreciate you if you've already done so, and there's no pressure to do any of the above for whatever reason. If you would be interested in potential auto chess runs of other Fire Emblem games, please do let me know in the comments. I don't have the requisite knowledge to be able to implement this personally for the other GBA games, so the main titles of interest to me would be the Fates games. I specify Fates because Awakening has already been completed, I believe, by both PMD and DOTS DFE, and as of the time of me writing the script, PMD is working on Autobattle Echoes. In addition, Tribolocal has done some cool, maddening Autobattle runs of both Free Houses and Engage that I would like to shout out, but I digress. Thank you once again for your time, I hope you enjoyed watching, and see you again next time. Until then, have a good one.